Glasgow, third largest city in the UK and home of the country's most fierce football rivalry. Its two main clubs have dominated the Scottish game since the 19th century. And when Rangers and Celtic meet, the so-called Old Firm derby generates an atmosphere like no other. On Saturday, the 2nd of January 1971, the two sides lined up against each other at Ibrox Stadium, home of Rangers. Among the 80,000 supporters packed into the ground was devoted Rangers follower Andy Ewan.
It was competitive, as they always are. There was the usual singing from both ends and, depending on where the play was at any given time.
In the era before all-seater stadiums, the majority of fans stood on the terraces. They were cramped and, when crowded, could be dangerous. The volunteer medics at the game were anticipating a busy 90 minutes.
Well, it was a usual Old Firm match. No prisoners were taken. It was pretty even-sided.
The match by normal standards was proving to be an uneventful one. With the score at 0-0, many of the fans even began to leave as the final whistle approached.
I remember thinking with a couple of minutes to go that it was just going to end as a 0-0 draw, and then Celtic launched an attack.
Lennox, and that's as near as we'll get it today, and it's a goal!
As Celtic's followers went wild, even more Rangers fans headed for the exits.
Rangers 0, Celtic 1, about 30 seconds to go.
But then, just as they thought the game was lost, their team launched a last-gasp attack.
Rangers went up the field. I think it was a free kick.
That's a free kick.
The ball was crossed over.
Smith.
Somebody headed it, and bang, it was in the net.
And it's a goal! Dramatic finish! There it is!
And that was it, a draw. And just shortly after that, the final whistle went.
Rangers 1, Celtic 1.
The whistle was the cue for celebrations, but also the signal for thousands of home fans to leave. They headed for Stairwell 13, a steep bank of steps at the rear of the ground.
There were always huge crowds, of course, and there were about 80,000 at Ibrox that day. So I knew there would be a mad rush for the subway and the supporters' buses.
But no one could have predicted what happened next. As the supporters streamed down the steps, one fan, believed to be a small boy, tripped and fell. The result, a catastrophic crash involving hundreds of other fans who stumbled, then collapsed on top of each other.
I could feel the pressure building from above, and I had no idea whether more bodies were likely to fall down over the top of me and bury me, basically, just as people below me were buried.
Robert Burns was in charge of 12 first aid volunteers.
I looked down at the other end and I saw there was something going on, but I couldn't make up my mind what it was. And I sent a squad down to see if they could find out.
One who could see what was happening all too vividly was fellow volunteer medic Ian Holmes.
When I reached the top of the terrace and looking down on stairway 13, all I could see was barriers mangled, people milling about, people lying on the ground. Made my way down to assist whatever way I could.
It quickly became apparent that some fans had been killed in the crush. Others were fighting for their lives.
It was just one seething mass. Bodies and twisted metal and screaming and shouting. Never forget it.
Although the young volunteer medics did their best to help, they were woefully ill-equipped to deal with a disaster on this scale.
Back in that sort of era, they didn't have the equipment they have now.
We were totally unprepared, never been exposed to anything like that.
They continued to pull out bodies from the crash, but for many, it came too late. Andy was one of the lucky ones.
It was a tremendous relief, the fact that it eased the pressure on my body. Just to feel the concrete, even cold concrete under my feet, was a massive relief. My legs were like jelly, and he just helped me down to the bottom of the stairs and just sat me down there. And I just felt complete and utter relief that I was out.
Andy was among more than 140 injured spectators who survived the disaster. 66 fellow supporters did not.
I had felt that I had been fortunate in walking away from it, and that it wasn't my time to die. Simple as that.
Today, a memorial to the victims stands at Ibrox Stadium. Each of the 66 names are commemorated, alongside a statue of John Gregg, the club's greatest ever servant and team captain on the day of the disaster. Survivors like Andy live with the memory of the tragedy every day. In the 4 decades since, he's also reflected often on the bravery of the medics who helped him and so many others. Today he's getting the chance to show his appreciation.
It will be an honour to meet the first aiders and to thank them personally for what they did that day.
The medics themselves have also not forgotten, and today's meeting's a chance to get a different perspective on a day that changed so many lives.
One of the rewards of a first aid training is that someday you may meet and shake the hand of someone whose life you have saved.
This is the first time ever that I have ever come in contact with someone who has been involved at an incident, because it's after we deal with them, we never see or hear of them again.
The people of Scotland, the people of Glasgow, felt that they had done such a magnificent job that day, but it'll be really wonderful to be able to shake their hands and to say thanks to them.
Good afternoon, sir. Pleasure to meet you.
I'm Andy.
I'm Tom.
It's me, Robert Burns.
Robert, nice to see you again. How are you? How you doing?
How you doing?
Nice to see you
Nice
again.
to see you.
When the disaster happened, the volunteers were young and inexperienced. Other than their first aid training, they had little means to help.
Is that the actual bag that you had on the day?
That bag would have been at the Ibrox Disaster because it was from my company. Inside that bag you would probably find there was field dressings, triangular bandages, a water bottle and some plasters.
Very, very basic at the time. Far advanced now, what we've got now to compared to those days.
People like yourselves actually must have helped a lot of folk to actually survive the incident who could have died otherwise. On the day of that disaster, you responded magnificently to a situation that none of us could have seen or ever dealt with before. And there's no doubt that you helped to save lives that day. And it's really great to meet you all. It's been a privilege to speak to you.
This is really the first time we've had the opportunity to meet with and speak with someone who was there, but at the other side, down in the seat of the disaster, looking up. And it's been a privilege to share some time with you this afternoon and just recall these things.
The tragedy that claimed so many lives led to a huge redevelopment of the ground. Much of the old standing terracing was torn down and replaced by seated structures in the hope that a disaster of this kind would never happen again. It's now a far cry from the stadium that they knew back in 1971.
The end of an era, do you think? Hard to imagine. It's almost a lifetime.
It feels kind of strange. You can sit here now, and look at the pitch. You've got a perfect view of the pitch, whereas the old terracing, depended on the height of the guy in front of you.
If it was a tall guy, you'd have problem.
How packed in you were. And, it's certainly a different world now. It is remarkable to hear just how little equipment the first aiders had in 1971, and they'd obviously never faced anything like the disaster that met their eyes when they went to the top of Stairway 13. It's remarkable that they actually managed to do so much with what they had.
You could say you perhaps saved his life. We'll never know. Nonetheless, the fact that somebody holds out their hands and says, "Thank you for your work. Thank you for the work that you continue to do," That makes the work more special.